everyone, and welcome to this webinar today. Where we're going to be talking about the VA home loan process, especially as it relates to transitioning service members who are getting out of the armed forces and moving into civilian life. I know it was something that was difficult for me, especially as I was transitioning from receiving that W-2 stable paycheck into a life of self-employment, which was a whole thing that I had not considered. And so there are a lot of factors that you need to be thinking about when it comes to the VA home loan while you are still in the service to really prepare yourself as you get out. And so, more than anything, I just want to let you know, one, Sean and I, we're both proud of you for taking advantage of the transitioning veteran timeline resource that you see here. It's going to be a great resource for you. Everything through the entire separation process or retirement process from the military. But this is an important factor as well to make sure that you're maximizing your benefits when it comes to the VA home loan. And so before we jump into it, I do just want to do some quick intros. So Sean, if you don't mind just giving a little bit of background about yourself and what you do now in helping veterans buy home throughout the country.
Yeah, no, thank you, Grant. My name's Sean Herrero. I'm a mortgage advisor. I lend throughout the country. I've been in this industry for 23 years. I fell into it when I was 19 years old and was behind the scenes. I was helping mortgage advisors kind of find solutions for people and solve their problems for about 15 years. And then in 2017, I decided if you want something done right, just go do it yourself. I jumped into helping people directly, and helping service members was a big part of that. The reason for that was a lot of people in my industry back then were saying how profitable VA loans were. And I didn't understand, why do you make more money off of helping a veteran or a service member than somebody else?
Sure.
And what I found is they would just kind of take margin for themselves because the VA rate is better, and they would just eat up some of that and make more money on it. I just didn't think that was the right thing to do. At the same time, a lot of times real estate agents don't understand how the benefit works, and they'll turn their clients away from accepting or entertaining a VA offer, which feels discriminatory to me. So I kind of took it as my duty to help people get home and make sure that everyone gets a fair crack at it. I became a VA expert. So it's a big passion project for me. I help a ton of people across the country, and yeah, it's been great working with you, Grant. Super fun.
Dude, absolutely. And thanks for being here. And thanks for, again, being an educator more than anything in the space, generally concerned with helping veterans, again, maximize
Mhm.
the benefit. And then for a little background on me, my name's Grant Vermeer. I actually went to the Naval Academy, if it wasn't obvious with the obnoxious signs in the background. I did 6 years as a cryptologic officer, did multiple submarine deployments, got out and jumped into the residential real estate world. So I'm licensed in California and Texas. But more importantly, much like Sean, I really pride myself on being an educator and service oriented in this space and just building a network of agents all across the country who are there to genuinely take care of you. Right. And so what we really want to get out of this webinar is education, right? The purpose of why we are here is to educate y'all about the VA loan, especially with the additional considerations, again, when it comes to folks getting out of the service, whether that be retirement or whether that just be your separation and transition out of the service. Right? We're going to talk about the transitioning to civilian life and its impact on home ownership. We're going to discuss a little bit the home buying process as a veteran, and then talk about some special considerations for those of you who will likely have a service disability rating with the VA. We're going to talk about this and do this a real deep dive on this. But the most important thing you can do right now is submit your VA disability claim. I mean, this can save you tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars over your lifetime, both in actual like payments and income, but especially when it comes to the VA loan, property tax, etc., and real estate in general. So stick around if you want to hear how that actually comes to life. We're going to touch on that a lot in this webinar. And then kind of the last thing I want to mention here before we really dive into it. Sean and I are not here to try and convince you to buy a home. We have zero desire for you to go out and buy a home if it's not the right decision for you. We just want to educate you on all the resources and processes that are available if you want to make the personal choice in your life to purchase a home, and then set you up for success in that process when you've made that very personal decision. Right. And so it's Sean, I know it's something you've talked about a lot, which is like, when's the right time to buy a home? When it's the right time for you, when it's the right
Yeah.
time for you in your life, right? There are ways to make it work and be beneficial. I don't know if you want to jump in and make a quick little statement on that, but
Yeah.
yeah.
No, it's when it's right for you.
Mhm.
Some people, I think owning a home is wonderful. There is pride in home ownership, but if it's going to stretch you financially, if you might be jumping around and moving more, it might not be the right time. But understanding all the things that we'll cover today will just position you better for figuring out when the right time is,
Yep.
and then making it a really simple process. I think buying homes, mortgages have been kind of painted as one size fits all picture lately. And I just don't believe that's the right way. It's individualized. What matters to you is what matters to you. It's going to be different for someone else.
Absolutely. So let's jump in, not wasting any time, jump in. And kind of the first thing that I think people will be questioning, baseline conversation is, how do I know if I'm eligible? Like when I get out of the service, do I get to use the VA loan even when I'm not, still active duty military? How does that work? And then, is there an expiration to that? Do I ever run out of my ability to use the VA loan?
Yeah, so you can use the VA benefit before you exit the service.
Sure.
So even if you're active duty, you want to buy a home before then, you can use it. So they call it your VA benefit, your veteran benefit. You
Mhm.
don't have to be a veteran, you can still be active duty and use that benefit. Your DD 214 kind of helps to prepare you for getting your certificate of eligibility for the VA loan.
Sure.
That's something any lender can pull on your behalf once they have a copy of your DD 214.
Mhm.
You can call the VA to get a copy of it as well. But what you're really looking for is your certificate of eligibility. And that's going to tell you the terms under which you're eligible for your benefit.
Yeah. And is that something that the person's going to have to get themselves? Like, do I have to get my own certificate of eligibility, or as you, as my lender, can you get it for me? Or what do I need to be
Yeah.
providing to make that happen?
Yeah, so normally we can just pull it. It's fairly automated at this point.
Mhm.
The VA does do a good job on the mortgage side of things. They've really done a good job with that benefit. So your lender can typically pull it for you with some basic information. They will require your DD 214 as part of the buying process, but typically we can get the certificate of eligibility early on, before, like right when you get into your pre-approval.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And when it comes to now, again, I know I am eligible and I want to get ready to, potentially purchase a home or at least, investigate if that's right for me. But I'm getting out of the service, right? Like I'm gonna be leaving the paycheck that I received from the Navy. Can I buy into the future? Right? Let's put this in the hypothetical situation of a service member who knows they're retiring or knows they're getting out of the service in 6 months, right? And I know, hey, I'm going to be moving to, for lack of a better example, Austin, Texas, and I'm going to be getting a job there. Can I buy into the future, like knowing I'm going to be going to Austin, or what's the process on that from both where I'm moving to as well as what do I need to provide for my future employer to actually be able to qualify for a loan or at least get moving in the right process?
So that's a really good question because it gets a little gray. It depends
Mhm.
on what you did in the military. So, what they look for in a VA loan is, do you have 2 years of work history
Mhm.
outside of the military? And that is something that kind of became like it's a rule, but it was gray because if you are working in the same industry as what you did in your service,
Mhm.
then you don't need that because your military service can count towards that 2 year history. So Grant, for example, being, if he went into tech in Austin,
Mhm.
I can show that based on what he did in his military service, it ties into what he's doing now,
Mhm.
and that would count towards it. So it's a little bit of a gray area,
Sure.
but that's really why, taking this whole webinar is so beneficial. It kind of leads you up to what steps you need to take to make sure these boxes are checked.
Yep.
So typically, 2 year work history. Can I count my military career towards my 2 year work history? All depends on, are you doing the same thing now as you did before? Something similar in the civilian world to that would be, you can count college as a 2 year work history as long as you can show transcripts for what you were doing. So if somebody went to nursing school
Mm.
and is now a nurse, we can check that box. If
Yep.
somebody went to nursing school and is now a mortgage advisor, those don't go together. So I need to see 2 years as a mortgage advisor.
Okay. Yeah, it's
Does that
it's
make sense?
interesting. Yeah, I mean, it totally makes sense. And when it comes to that situation, let's say again, kind of the exact example. I was a cyber officer, I was a cryptologic officer. I go and I become a project manager at Google in Austin, and Google gives me like an offer of compensation, right, for my new job that I'm going to be starting 2 months in the future. But I'm trying to figure out my living situation now. Is that
Mhm.
offer of compensation enough knowing I have that history of 2 years, or what do I need to start kind of making those first paychecks from Google first to be able to qualify for that loan, and how would I navigate that as a service member?
It comes down to your start date. So the VA requires that you occupy your home within 60 days of closing on it, 59 days to be exact.
Okay.
So on that offer letter, if it's a guaranteed offer letter with no contingencies, no background check, no contingent upon these items, and it's salary, you can use that salary immediately. So you could potentially buy a house before you even start the job.
Mhm.
The other benefits in that example, like if you're receiving bonus income or restricted stock or commission or overtime,
Mhm.
those are considered variable sources of income. We cannot use those for qualifying. But from an offer letter perspective, the salary on a non contingent offer letter that's been accepted by both parties can be used right away.
Yep. And what about if you're a crazy person like me and you get out and you start your own business and are self-employed? How does that change for individuals? Kind of, you mind giving a quick rundown of, again, the quite literally the implications that come from being a self-employed individual and a business owner when it comes to qualifying for loans, especially transitioning out of the service and entering into a new industry that you may not have done in the military, kind of like we're talking about, and have that work history.
So that's where you're going to need 2 years with self-employment, and this would apply in the civilian world. Well, it's a little different,
Mhm.
but they're going to want 2 year history, and that means 2 year history of taxes being filed. Because the only way we can qualify self-employment income is from your tax returns. Because you, as a business owner, you get to take advantage of tax write-offs. They're going to take those things into consideration. So if somebody started a business in January of 2023, they would be eligible to use their self-employment income once they have filed their 2024 tax return in 2025.
Mm,
So you end up with like a 26 to 28-month gap in
sure.
most cases. That doesn't mean that if you started a business but also had a salary position somewhere else, you could use the salary while you're building your business. But if it's purely on self-employment income, they're going to want to see that 2 year history.
Yeah, no, love it. Or you can just go the Grant Vermeer route and marry back into the Navy. Yeah, gotta get my
Yeah, that
spouse's
works
income.
too.
Yeah, I tried to escape the Navy, and the Navy brought me right back in, but, I'm not complaining as I go through this whole entrepreneurial grind here. But, alright, so we kinda have that baseline set and the foundation set now for, again, as people are transitioning out. What about if someone used their VA loan on active duty and they still own that home? Do you mind kind of running through again this idea of entitlement and what factors need to be considered when it comes to using the VA loan a first time and then potentially a second time and continually down the road?
Yeah, that's actually one of the coolest things about it is you can buy. So your VA entitlement enables you to buy with zero money down, with no limits. If somebody wanted to buy a $4 million house with
Mhm.
no down payment, the VA would allow that. No
Sure.
one does it. The payment would be absolutely insane, but there's no loan limit on your first use of your benefit. If you wanted to use your second use entitlement, that means you still own this house, the first one you purchased.
Mhm.
There's going to be a loan limit on the second use.
Okay.
And that is going to be based upon the county loan limits, and those vary across the country.
Mhm.
So let's just say you were stationed in Georgia, bought a house out there for $300,000, and then you moved to California. Well, in the Bay Area where I'm at, the loan limit in these counties is $1,149,000. You could potentially, most likely, buy another property with little to no down payment
Mhm.
because the loan limits are so high here.
Yep.
Nationally, the loan limit for next year, 2025, is going to be 802,000 and change.
Mhm.
They just announced that a couple weeks ago. So that's a national loan limit, and then they'll have county specific above and beyond that. There's a funky calculation, and I won't bore everyone with the details, but basically, on your second use, they take the amount of entitlement that you've utilized, and there's a formula we use to figure out what the maximum loan amount is
Mhm.
on your second use. There is a way to buy potentially, as long as there's entitlement remaining, to buy another property with zero down. Otherwise, there's this moving scale where you would make up the difference. And let's just take a $500,000 home, and let's just say the difference, between the entitlement remaining
Yep.
and the purchase price was $100,000. You don't have to come up with the $100,000 difference. You just have to come up with 25% of the
Hmm.
difference.
Okay.
So that's only 25,000. So you're still buying with minimal down payment on your second use.
Interesting. Yeah, so like you're saying, if you have that 1.1 limit in the San Francisco Bay Area, but you're putting an offer in a home that's like 1.5 to cover that $400,000 gap, you would basically just need to come in with a down payment of $100,000, right? Like 25%, more or less.
No, 25% of the difference.
Okay. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
all right.
So 20 so that's where it
Yeah.
gets confusing is you're coming up with 25% of the difference between the maximum loan amount from your second use entitlement
Yep.
and the purchase price.
Yeah.
So going the other direction, let's say somebody was stationed in San Diego and bought a home out here, at a higher price point and then they went to move to Georgia,
Mhm.
they may not have any entitlement remaining because of the price point being higher and the county loan limits being lower in Georgia.
Interesting.
Right. So, but there's a misconception that your VA benefit for your home purchase is a one and done. And you can use it multiple times, but you can also have more than one at a time as long as you have entitlement remaining.
Sure. Interesting. All right. And so, kind of with that is, again, if I'm using it multiple times, and again, this idea of the VA loan is to move into your primary residence,
Mhm.
can I use it to buy what we'll call, for lack of a better term, an investment property? And so, what I really, again, kind of the reason for this question is, again, when we talk about buying your second home or using your VA loan the second time, can I rent out my first property that I lived in and turn that into what we'll call an investment property from that point forward?
Yeah, absolutely. That's
Mhm.
one of the things I love about it is you could buy it as your primary residence,
Mhm.
live in it for at least 12 months,
Yep.
and then if you have a permanent change of station, you get out of the military, you could keep that property rented out and keep your VA loan on that. The requirement is that you purchase the property as a primary residence.
Mhm.
Right? You can't say, "Hey, I'm going to buy a house as an investment." It doesn't work that way. But once you own it,
Yep.
there's nothing to stop you from renting it out. When you go to buy your next home, that's where
Mhm.
that second use entitlement that we just talked about would come into play. Or what a lot of people will do is refinance to free up their full benefit,
Yep.
refinance the other property as an investment property using conventional financing, and then they can go rinse and repeat. I have a friend in Virginia who his friend has bought multiple multi-unit properties using this formula and has built a little empire out there.
Absolutely, right? And again, the the focus of this episode hopefully is just about the person potentially wanting to buy just their first home or their primary
Mhm.
residence. But again, what I would encourage is, if that sounded interesting to you, again, there are ways to really leverage this opportunity to build a lot of wealth, right? And so that's something that's unique or interesting to you or just intriguing and you heard it, like, please reach out to us, right? We would love to talk to you about it and just, again, give you the resources that you would need to learn to educate yourself on it and then potentially make decisions, right? And so, again, if anything that we've said already has resonated with you, please shoot me a text message, call me, send me an email, and let's get in touch, right? Like, stop. You can watch the rest of the webinar. I'd love it. But if you just want to talk about your specific situation, like, shoot us a message now. Again, Sean and I will be here to answer any questions that you have. Like, that's our goal, right? That's our goal. And the beautiful thing about this and what we've created is we have a network across the country where we know people who will take care of you and get you helped in this situation. So, before we jump more into some of the loan VA use here, again, and just doubling down on, we receive calls all the time about people having these questions, and we love it. We love talking to you. We love answering these questions. So don't hesitate. Like, just shoot us a message and let's start talking about your specific situation if there's any way we can help. Transitioning back now, for someone who may be single, right, is still a single sailor or married and moving into a place like a New York City or an Austin or a San Francisco, where living in a condo is more, common, for lack of a better term. Can you buy a condo with a VA loan, right? Because again, I see sometimes there are some condos that are not approved. Do you mind walking us through the condo approval process and what it means, like what you need to use a VA loan to purchase a condo?
Yeah, that's a really good question because the misconception by a lot of real estate agents is if the condo is not approved, sorry, no,
Not
you
allowed.
can't use it.
Yep.
And this gets a little touchy depending on the market because if it's a really competitive market,
Hmm.
the seller may not accept an offer. If they have 5 offers, they may not accept ours if one of our contingencies to buy the house is getting it approved by the VA,
Sure.
right? To the seller, that could be a sticking point of, well, what if it doesn't happen? And what if it takes too long? And it gets scary. But if it's not that situation, the VA condo approval process is relatively straightforward.
Mhm.
It's not labor intensive on your side, it's labor intensive on ours.
Yep.
There's a lot of documents we have to get from the HOA management company, which hopefully the real estate agents help us out with. Once we get everything that the VA needs, we send it out to them for condo approval. And what they're really looking for is things that would put the veteran or the service member at a disadvantage when it comes to selling the property.
Hmm.
So is there something in here that's going to hurt them, right? And make it to where they bought it for 500 and based on this, now they can only sell it for 4. They really are looking out for the best interest of the veteran I haven't had to do one in a few months, but the last one I did only took about 10 days. The VA will always quote longer turn times,
Yep.
and they always say, we don't rush anything because one veteran's needs is not more important than another's. But it's a pretty straightforward process. I've probably done it 6 or 7 times in the last 2 years.
Yes, absolutely possible, right? Same thing on our end. We've helped multiple active duty members, especially coming up into the Monterey area for us as well, and in Austin, get condos approved, right? And so
Mhm.
it's not a barrier, right? Obviously, it's an obstacle, but it's totally doable, right? And I think that's kind of the big thing is when you have people who are in your corner to help. Like we can solve these problems, right? Like it's not going to be a major issue and something that we can totally, make happen. And so
And
oh,
on
please.
that note, I just thought of one. I just helped someone in the Air Force. He's at Travis Air Force Base.
Yep.
This condo had been sitting on the market for a long time, so it was the perfect one for us to do the VA approval on.
Mhm,
We sent it in into our office on our end to review it. The condo project had been approved in 1981,
mhm.
and they were just like, "All right, we're good." I didn't have to do any updates. I'm just like, I was shocked by that. I'm just like, 1981, like we're good,
There
and
we
they're like,
go.
"Yeah." So that was surprising to me.
No, indeed. And kind of on the flip side, obviously, kind of your condo, your small area. What about multifamily properties, right? Someone interested in a duplex, a triplex, a quadplex. How does that relate to the VA loan? Can I use the VA loan to purchase up to a quadplex? And how does projected rents kind of play into the qualification on that end?
Yeah, so you can do up to 4 units
Mhm,
with zero down. There's another formula for projected rents. We have to get a rent survey from the appraiser.
mhm.
There's a few little things you go through on that, but there's no condo. So with a condo, you're getting condo approval.
Yep.
But if you own two, three, 4 units, you own those units. It's not shared ownership like a condo is.
Mhm.
So buying 2 to 4 units is the same process outside of the rental income calculations as buying a single family.
Yep.
And I think if you're in, the earlier phase of life, and that is what I would do if I could, is you can buy a multi-unit with zero down with the intention and plan of keeping that as a rental later. I think it's a super smart play to start building real estate over time.
Mhm.
But there's not much to it. It really, I guess the biggest sticking point with VA loans overall, and maybe we segue into this, is pest inspections,
Yep.
right? So the pest inspection would be important on any type of property.
Yep. Yeah, no, 100%. So that is an interesting piece. Again, when we talk about the VA loan, in order to get a VA loan approved, right, through all these things, there cannot be what we call Section 1 pest work. There cannot be active wood destroying organisms that are involved with the house, right? And so that can be tough because a lot of places you go, right, people who are using conventional funding will be like, "Oh, it's fine. Like we'll fix it on our own time." In order to qualify in the VA world, you need to have those issues remediated, right? And so I think that's always an interesting factor, and this is why it's really important. Again, obviously, we encourage that you work with people who are experienced with the VA loan because having those relationships with pest inspectors and people who can remediate pest work extremely quickly, do spot solutions at time to prevent, again, when you're in trying to purchase like a townhome potentially and there's some pest work, again, if you were to fumigate that residence, you'd have to fumigate every single residence that is attached by walls, right? And that become a major factor. And so having people in your corner who know how to solve these issues for you and provide solutions to get you the home that you want is really important, right? And so knowing those rules, knowing the forms and the documents, whether that be an actual pest inspection or an MPMA 33, right? Like there are a lot of opportunities to make this happen and get you in the home that you want, right? And so yeah, Sean,
Well,
yeah,
let's touch on that real quick because you
yeah,
just said the NPMA 33. So not a lot of people know about that form,
yep.
and I'm so happy to hear Grant bring it up because a lot of real estate agents don't know about it. A lot of lenders don't know about it, and there is a misconception of Section 1 repairs because Section 1 repairs on a termite report can be mold, fungus, it can be health and safety. Mold would obviously be health and safety. But the VA didn't ask about those things. They only asked if there was an active infestation.
Yep.
And so, what I do with all of our clients is one, when we make an offer, I tell the real estate agents that, we don't need to know about everything. Like the VA wants to know if there's an active infestation.
Yep.
Here's a one-page form. As if there's no active infestation, we're done, right? Let's give people what they need, no more, no less.
Yep.
and that's can be a game changer, because I just had a client, they didn't offer on it, but they just went through, oh, there's $8,000 in section 1 repairs to be done. They were all fungus.
Yep.
The VA doesn't care.
Phoenix.
They care if they know about it. They
Sure.
care if they know about it. But if we don't know, and all I have is the VA required NPMA 33, which is a fillable PDF that the inspector can complete, and they check that there's no active infestation, we're done. If they check that there is active infestation, they'll list what it is. And then to Grant's point, we would just get those items fixed
Fixed.
prior to closing.
Mhm.
But I think because of misconceptions from what things were on VA loans a long time ago, realtors get stuck on that, and that's why they shy away from it. Is because it's ignorance. I don't mean that as a negative term. It's just a lack of understanding,
Yep.
because it's evolved.
Yep. No, 100%. And I think that's one of these critical things, especially with that MPMA 33, and it's having relationships with the pest inspectors to be like, hey, I know you're going to produce your report, right? And we want to see the report because we want the buyer to know everything that they're going into. But when it comes to, if
Mhm.
that's your dream home and you want to get into it, and the barrier preventing you is potentially that like you would have to get these things fixed, but there's a solution to that, right? We can be like, hey, while you're filling out your report, will you also fill out this form, right? That's the conversation that I have with pest inspectors is we still want your full report, but will you also fill out this form that we can give to the lending side? Again, that indicates there's no active infestation of wood destroying organisms, right? And so there are ways to go through this where you still have all the information you need to make an informed decision, but we're also producing what we need, like he's saying, no more, no less, to actually get your loan approved, right? And to get you into that home. And so,
Yeah, and it's no, like, it's what do I as a homeowner and a home buyer need to know, and what does the loan require,
yeah.
right? And conventional loans are no different. If I get a request for repairs that say, "Hey, seller, I want $15,000 to fix this, and this,"
Mhm.
and the real estate agent send that to me, guess what? I now have to ask for all these repairs to be done before close. I didn't need to know, but since you guys told us, we can't unsee it.
Yep.
And that's where I go, what do the guidelines actually say versus what is our interpretation of what is needed?
Yep.
And it's just been too long that people weren't using Grant, you might be one of the only real estate agents that truly knows about that form without me bringing it to their attention. I'm proud of you.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Again, it's just that's why again, to me, that's why it's so important, especially as a transitioning service members using the VA loan, that you have someone who's done it before and experienced it, right? And gone through these to make it happen. So I appreciate that, Sean. My God.
Yeah.
But kind of touching on some, again, we'll go on this idea of common misconceptions, right? And so
Mhm.
if I'm someone, I haven't used the VA loan before, I've never bought a home, and I just see the VA loan and people just say 0% down. Does that mean I need $0 to actually be able
No.
to buy the home? And I'm going to turn this over to you to talk about closing costs, the VA funding fee, etc.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's been a really important thing to me lately is, should people buy homes if they don't have any money, right?
Mm,
Whether you can or can't, my personal opinion is, if you have $0 to your name, don't buy a house
mm,
yet. There are ways to do that with your VA benefit.
sure.
You could get a credit from the seller for all of the closing costs.
Mhm.
If you have 10% or more disability rating, you won't have a VA funding fee, which is why in the very beginning we said, as you transition out, one of the first things you want to do is get that claim in early,
Yep.
because it'll save you tens of thousands of dollars, if not more, over your lifetime.
Yep.
So could you buy a home with no money? Absolutely. It's possible. It doesn't mean you should,
Should.
right? And I think our job as fiduciaries is to kind of give that advice. At the end of the day, people choose what they choose,
Yep.
but I don't think you should. So closing costs. So even if you have no down payment, there are still closing costs associated with the transaction to transfer the property from one owner to another. You'll either have attorney fees in some states, you'll have escrow and title fees in some states,
Yep.
lender fees, depending on who the lender is, credit
Mhm.
report fees, county recording fees. So
Yep.
there are fees associated with it. And I don't like to say, it's a X% of your purchase price, because it just doesn't. A $2 million home is not going to have the same percentage as a $200,000 home.
Sure.
But there are there, and those cannot be rolled into the loan amount. You would pay those out of pocket unless you got a credit from the seller to cover those on your behalf.
Yep.
And again, to reiterate on your disability claim, the VA funding fee. So if you're buying your home for the first time, your VA funding fee would be 2.15% with zero down. That means if you bought I'll use a million just to have an easy number. If you buy $1 million home, that's a $21,500 fee that you're paying. You don't pay it out of pocket. You can, but you don't have to. Most people elect to roll that into their loan amount.
Hmm.
But you are paying interest on $21,500 that if you have 10% or more disability rating, it doesn't apply.
Yep.
If you go to use your second use with zero down, that fee bumps up to 3.3%.
Hmm.
So it makes a massive difference having some percentage of disability in place. And then if we get into the, on property taxes, there's a lot of benefits. If you have 100% disability,
Yep.
it can make a massive difference. And this is very, very county specific, but your tax break can be pretty substantial as well.
Pretty substantial. For example, in Texas, in the state of Texas, right? If you have 100% disability, you pay zero property tax, right? Which is crazy because in Texas, the benefit of being in Texas is no state income tax, but they get people by extremely high property tax rates. So if you're
Right.
also not paying property tax, I mean, it's huge, right? It's huge.
Hmm.
Now, there are some discounts if you have some disability, but not 100%. It's really minimal, right? So it's like at that point where, again, but you're saving money regardless, right? When it comes to property tax and taking advantage of that when it comes to submitting your VA disability claim. So as you're going through this transition timeline and you're doing all these things, again, go see the doctor. Go to medical, tell them about what's going on, what you are experiencing, because all of that will be critically important in getting your VA disability claim, which again is so much more. There's so much more impact than just the check you will receive from the VA, right? Like Sean's saying, $21,500 over 30 years of interest is a lot of money that you will be saving in your entire life by going and getting your VA disability claim, right? And
Right.
taking care of yourself. So much and just doubling down again on the fact go see the doctor. Go see. This is my one thing. My wife's always like, "Oh, my back's kind of hurting from, sitting in the cockpit and flying the helicopters." I was like, "Go to the doctor."
Right.
Tell him. Tell him,
Yeah,
dude.
it's really interesting because people put it off, and so if you do put it off,
Mm,
basically you can get the VA funding fee refunded
yep.
if you. So let's say you put in your claim today and you bought a house tomorrow, you would end up paying the VA funding fee because they wouldn't have processed your claim in time.
Yep.
But because you can document when the claim was filed, once your claim is put into place, you can get a refund of your funding fee. So I just come back to it because not even thinking about the income that it provides, right? The savings from removing that VA funding fee is massive.
Yep. No, 100%. 100%. And so as we jump into now, I'll just call it a little bit of the home buying process when it comes to using the VA loan. And the first thing, if you were to come to me as a realtor and say, "Hey, I'm interested in buying a home," the first thing I'm going to do is send you to Sean, right? Or send you to a lender to get what we call pre approved. So, Sean, do you mind walking us through, again, this idea of a pre qualification versus a pre approval and being underwritten and how that impacts, again, your competitiveness as a buyer in a competitive situation?
Yeah. So a pre-qualification is you put information into the internet, and based on what you put in, you get a letter that says, based on the fillable fields you completed, you're pre-qualified. It's meaningless,
Hmm.
and it's meaningless to real estate agents. And I really want you to believe that it's meaningless to you because the data and the details matter. So what you want to do is get a true pre-approval, and I would say get it as early as possible because there should be no fees to get pre-approved.
Hmm.
They don't necessarily have to do a hard credit check right out of the gate, and even if they do have to do a hard credit check, it does not negatively impact your credit scores. Mortgage inquiries work in a different way than credit cards, auto loans, or student loans because they want you to be willing to take that step towards home ownership,
Yep.
and they don't want it to be a deterrent.
With
So
that,
there's
sorry
no
to cut you
cost.
off before you go.
Yeah.
Can I get a second pre-approval and have someone pull on that area as well? Like if someone gets a first pull from a different lender, but then comes to you a second time, is it negatively affecting their credit score to get that second opinion?
No, great question. So no, the way the credit score modeling system is set up is if you ran. So let's just say I'm helping Grant. He runs credit with me today. I give him his pre-approval. We give him all the details. He goes, "Cool, I got Sean's opinion. I want to go look for a different other lenders to make sure I find the right fit for me."
Mhm.
You can run your credit numerous times within 30 days of the first run with no impact to your scores whatsoever. It's built in a way that you don't get stuck with one lender. They want you to feel the ability to shop and look around and not feel like, oh, I didn't really like this person, but I don't want my credit score to go down, so I guess I'm
Just
stuck. They
you.
want you to have freedom in shopping and looking for the right fit.
Yeah. No, love that. And yeah, and so again, from my perspective too, as a real estate agent, if I had a listing, right? And we had a listing and we had two offers. One from someone who submitted something with a pre-qualification and a second one with a person who had a pre-approval from their lender, right? The first thing I do as a listing agent is I call the lenders and say, "Hey, on this file, how confident do you feel?" Right? Because I need to go to my seller and say, "Hey, yes, if you take this offer, this loan is going to go through and we are going to close escrow." Right. And so you are doing yourself a disservice as a buyer if you are not getting that pre approval. Because again, on the other side, the selling agent's telling the seller, like, hey, there's a possibility, like this person hasn't been fully vetted. There's a possibility this loan doesn't go through, right? And you put yourself at risk of this transaction not closing, right? And so
Mhm.
taking that very seriously and doing that early is important. And then the second piece is it gives you a good idea of what you can actually qualify for. But back to Sean's point again about having no money and probably not being the right decision to buy a home, what you qualify for doesn't mean that's like what you should buy, right? Necessarily. Again, if it's your perfect home and you're willing to stretch, great. But you should set a budget of what you are actually wanting and willing to pay before you do that, right? And what you qualify for doesn't mean that that is what you should buy necessarily, right? And so just putting that in perspective for people, because I think sometimes we can get in this sense of like we fall in love with this home without really knowing what it's going to cost us, and then we get that sticker shock eventually of like, oh, like that's what I'm gonna have to pay on a monthly basis, right? I think it's better to kind of go with the approach of like, what am I comfortable paying with on a monthly basis, wrap that into our general price range for a home, so that way we're making decisions that are based out of, a level of comfortability, right? A level of
Yeah,
comfortability.
and that's why I say to do it early. There's no cost, no obligation. There's no reason not to. But by getting pre-approved very early on, one, you figure out your budget and your comfort zone, right? So I always say it doesn't matter what the banks say you qualify for; it's what you want to qualify for that matters.
Yep.
And this may not be a for now plan. You may get pre-approved and say, you know what? At least now I know where I need to set my goals because this is where I want to be in 1, 2, 3 years.
Yep.
So it's a planning tool, and what we do is we build personalized websites for every client. We call them buyer's guide sites that they're live forever. It's your own unique URL. And we use it as a planning tool. So you can look at it from every angle, have full disclosure, full transparency, and make educated decisions. So the way that it goes wrong is when people do wait to the last minute. Hey, I found a house. I want to make an offer tomorrow. A lot of times they miss the house because they just weren't prepared
Yep.
because they didn't take that first step.
100%. Well, not to drag this on, again, this is a lot of information crammed in a short amount of time. I hope this was educational. I hope it helped kind of start to get your brain turning about things that are important to you as you go through this process, right? And so, again, Sean, thanks so much for taking the time to join us today and share your insight into this whole process. And then for everyone out there listening, again, I just highly encourage you to reach out if you have any questions. We want to be educators. We want to be helpers. We want to make sure you're getting taken care of when you make the personal decision to buy a home. All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much. Feel free to reach out to us at any time. And thanks for listening.